Okay, this is Network Value-Added Attributes Part 4, and I promise it is the last part of the Network Value-Added Attributes. You will not have to hear about any more of these. Okay, this one is interesting. We maybe should have made this Part 1 because it's about the plus flow table. And all the other value-added attributes are computed based on what's in the plus flow table. But once you have the other value-added attributes, the plus flow table sort of fades into the background and you use the BAAs to do things like navigation and so forth. But I think it's important to understand what the plus flow table tells us, and there are folks who are using it for a variety of things. So we want to understand the mechanics of using that table, and we also want to show how to obtain and install and use another navigator called the Plus Flow Table Navigator. All righty. The purpose of the Plus Flow Table is to enable the traversal of the network and the coastline, both upstream and downstream, one flow line at a time. With the VAAs, you do it with SQL queries, and you leap up a ways, and then you do another SQL query, and you leap up some more. You aren't traversing one flow line at a time, and if you have some need to do that, the Plus Flow Table's for you. It contains a record for every place where two flow lines exchange water. It also contains a record for headwaters. So there's a record for every headwater. It contains a record for every network terminus. So every terminal flow line gets a record in the flow table. And it also tells you where surface water flow lines touch the coastline, or the place where two coastlines touch each other. So you can navigate on the coast with the flow table, or you can navigate up the streams or down the streams and then on the coast. There are 5 attributes that are important in the Plus Flow Table. The from-com ID, that's the upstream flow line. The to-com ID is the downstream flow line. The record type, which tells you what kind of a record it is in the Plus Flow. A question, does this flow relationship have geometry? We have taken the NHD flow table, which this is derived from, and we've extended it a bit. We have places where flow leaves flow line A and it enters flow line B, but there's no geometry that connects the two. You see this in karst areas where nobody knows where the flow goes underground. You see it along the international borders where the flow leaves the United States, and then somewhere later it comes back into the United States, but we have no geometry in the international area for that particular connection. So we have records in our flow table that don't necessarily have geometry to represent them. So if you're going to navigate the NHD Plus and you're going to do it with a geometric network, which we are going to do tomorrow, you've got to remember that there are places where the geometric network isn't going to get you the whole way there. The last attribute is the gap distance. If has geo is a no, meaning there is no geometry, then the gap distance is filled in, and it tells you how far apart, as the crow flies, that the two flow line endpoints are in terms of kilometers. The 4 record types are a start flow is a 712 record type. So every headwater has a 712 record in the table. A flowing record is a 709. So when flow line A, stream river A, flows to stream river B, that's a 709 record. When you come to the end of the network, every terminus has a record, and it's a 713. And when you get to the coastline, when a stream flows to a coastline segment, it's a 714 flow record, meaning there's no real water exchanging hands there. The stream has just come and it's hit the coast. And when two coastlines touch, that's also a 714 record. Here's an example, little simple example of a flow table that represents the flow in this diagram. You can see that there's a 712 or a headwater record for 1 and for 2. There's also a headwater record here for 4. Okay. There's a terminal record down here for 12. This guy goes off and he just flows into the ground. Now, 8 is not a terminal because it touches the coast. Terminals are where the water disappears, where it's just not connected to anything else. If you go out to the Great Basin, which is hydrologic region 16, everything's like that. Nothing flows to the coast, and there are lots and lots of terminal flow lines there. And you can see the 714s, which are the coastal connections. So 8 is a coastal connection to 9. By convention, we go around the country counterclockwise in the flow table. So 8 goes to 9 and 10 goes to 9. And they continue on around and across the Great Lakes and down the Pacific coast and around the, country in a counterclockwise direction. Here's an example of gap dist. 3 and 4 both flow to 5, but there's no geometry there to represent that connection, and they're a half a kilometer. The endpoints are half a kilometer apart. To make the plus flow table useful, we've also replicated some of the value-added attributes in it. And they're just joined to the plus flow table as a convenience, And there are a lot of things that you can do with plus flow as a result of having these attributes there. And it's the from hydroseek and the to hydroseek of the two from and to flow lines, the from level path and the to level path. The flow record represents a 709 and a 714, represents two flow lines that touch each other or are otherwise connected with or without geometry. And so they, by definition, have a conceptual node between them. So the node number for that location where this flow record is just talking about is in the table. The total drainage square kilometers for both the from and the, or to that node, and the divergence routed drainage area is also there. Okay, Flow Table Navigator, it's available from the website. You can download it. It comes in a 7Z file. You uncompress it and run the install. When you uncompress it, you get an MSI and an EXE. You want to run the EXE, the setup.exe. You'll need .NET. You'll need ArcGIS. You will not need SQL Server, which is sort of nice. But it installs an Arcmap Toolbar. So once you've gotten it installed to Windows, you can add it to Arcmap by right-clicking on the Arcmap Toolbar and picking Customize, and you'll see this dialog. You click Add from File. You navigate to where you installed it. You pick the Toolbar TLB file, click Open, and just like the VAA Navigator that we talked about before, it should give you these added objects. It has 4 tools, just like the VAA Navigator. It goes upstream main stem, upstream with tributaries, downstream main stem or downstream with diversions. You pick a tool. This toolbar is green and the VAA toolbar is blue, which is, other than hovering over them, that's the only way you can tell them apart. You need two pieces of data to use the flow table navigator. You need NHD flow line and you need the plus flow table. Load those into your map and you're good to go. You pick a tool, you click on a flow line with the tool, and you go upstream main stem, upstream with tributaries. You go downstream main stem, downstream with divergences. So these results look exactly like what you would get with the VAA navigator. There are no stop conditions for the flow table navigator. There are no start options either. It always does full flow line navigation, and it returns to you a selected set of flow lines rather than a new layer in your map. And this is the NHD flow line feature class selected for a navigation. We navigated 71 flow lines, and all it is a selected set. And that is the end of part 4. So, questions? Curtis?
If you mentioned that through programming, scripting, you can access some of these the methods that
The
navigator tools, yeah.
The flow table navigator is not callable.
Oh, okay.
The flow table navigator was developed back in the early NHD days because all it needs is a flow table to do it. And so it will actually run on NHD, okay, without NHD Plus. And it's just we've carried it along and never modernized it to reflect NHD Plus, but other value-added attributes in NHD Plus.
So I bet if you're a Python programmer, I bet you could easily load the tables into a dictionaries and lists and go to town.
Definitely. Any more questions?